Okay.
So
when
I've
people come
watched
up.
you.
Yeah, so we are live. This is the 14th, I believe the 14th or 15th episode of the Celebrate the Brand Ambassador. I'm really excited to be here with some dear old friends as well as amazing brand ambassadors as well as just career men in this industry, Mr. Tim Master and Adam Harris. Thank you guys for being here with me.
Thank you.
How's everybody?
Good.
All right. And I just want to preface this, not Tim's house. He's in an Airbnb and those oars are not his aesthetic.
I thought they were shovels at first and I got a little worried.
Yeah.
Adam, she said, Elaine said yesterday, I didn't take you as an oar guy. So
yeah.
That was a great line.
Yeah, I didn't take you as a boat guy. So I really am excited to talk to you guys because we all became brand ambassadors around the same time, which is around 2005, 2006. The industry has changed a lot. That there used to only be like 4 or 5 of us. Now there is hundreds. Unfortunately, and hopefully there will be hundreds again. I know a lot of people got furloughed during the pandemic, but I know slowly they're all coming back, which is great news. And I thought it'd be really interesting because a lot of us, our careers have changed as we have grown within the industry. So I wanted to start back into both of you guys were behind the bar when you became brand ambassadors, right? So Tim, you were in Philly, and Adam, you were here in New York City, working behind Dylan Prime. So I'm going to start with you, Tim. Why did you decide to get out from behind the bar? Because I knew you had a dream of opening a restaurant to become a brand ambassador.
Yeah, that's a great question that I still think about sometimes. But, I guess it was, I was behind the bar in the restaurants on some capacity for 20 years. And it was like your mid-30s. And I hear this a lot from people who are now in the bar industry in their mid-30s. And, you start to contemplate like, oh, wait, there's life after. There's a little bit longer of a life that you have to plan. So I started to contemplate what that like career trajectory was for me. And it, I guess coupled with trying to open up my own place, a failed attempt here, something didn't work out. And while that wasn't working out, the partying and the drinking was. So I knew I had to make a change. And it was interesting. I was like, okay, well, what do I do? I have a college degree. Yeah, great. But I'm in my mid-30s. And what do I know? I know booze. I know restaurants. I love hospitality. I love the bar business. And that's kind of when the change was coming. And then, this is back 2006. So brand ambassadors weren't huge.
No.
And I remember it was an English dude walks into my bar. It's like a joke, right? And
and the infamous Simon Ford, correct?
And it was Simon Ford with a guy named Jamie, his buddy Jamie Terrell, who was the Plymouth Gin UK person at the time. And they just started talking about gin and brand ambassadorship, and one thing led to another. And then it was, I said, oh, cool, I'll be a brand ambassador, but what? Yeah, it was awesome. And not a better person to like come under than Simon.
It's so funny. Tim Cooper, who now works with Simon, he met Jamie Gordon he was working at Bed, and then he met Simon, and he was like, this seems like a great job. I'll do that. And he started off as a part-time, and I know, and we'll talk about, you started off as part-time as a brand ambassador. And Adam, you were working at Dylan Prime. I used to love that place. I used to go spend a lot of time there.
And I remember the time that I first met Simon Ford and served him a cocktail at Dylan Prime. So that's he was hanging out with Jamie Gordon, funny enough, not Jamie Terrell, the other Jamie at the time, right?
It's like Simon Ford is going to be the person who's the seven steps. Who's the famous actor?
Kevin Bacon. He's
Kevin
Bacon of food.
Simon Ford is Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon.
Yep. I think that my story is not too different from Tim's. I think Tim might have had more of a commitment to opening up his own place. That one for me was more of kind of a dream. I really enjoyed the hospitality nature of bartending. I always love the opportunity to kind of create several different experiences throughout the night for so many different people, and being able to read that room and be able to make that connection and be able to provide that experience or that ambiance that they were looking for, that they need, or maybe that they didn't even know they needed at the time. But that was always kind of that personal connection, and I think I started to discourage myself because I'm not necessarily a business-minded person. I am kind of that more of a socially out there. I enjoy being talking. I like communicating and sharing. And so when the opportunity to be a brand ambassador, when I started kind of being considered for the Maker's Mark position at the time, again, I had only met a couple of people at the time that were brand ambassadors. My predecessors, Simon, maybe one other guy, I can't remember, but meeting people that own brands and knowing that these things were out there and knowing the brands that I liked were bourbon. And when Maker's Mark came calling, it just seemed like a natural fit for me. You know, I'd like to say you can always bartend or you can always bartend, right? And I could be very happy always bartending. But I also kind of started to see that I'm going to be 30 soon. I'm thinking about what is that next step. I'm not necessarily creating my own next step. So here's an opportunity. And, a lot of, if it's serendipity, it's serendipity, right? So I was in the right place.
Well, tell them how you served. Who did you serve at your bar for Makers?
Bill Samuels came into my bar. Bill Samuels came into the bar a few times, but even before I worked for him. And so I had the opportunity to make him our signature Manhattan that we did at Dillon Prime that Mike Waterhouse had created. It was this beautiful, slight interpretation of a Manhattan, but had the chance to meet Bill a few times. And I think that, him just kind of knowing who I was when my name started getting thrown around out there to replace John Henry, I think that was a bit of a step up, but it was, or at least an advantage. That put me a little bit above the other people that were up for the job. I don't know who those people were, but I'm sorry.
You should not be sorry. You had to fill big shoes. Tim, do you know John Henry?
I do. I knew the name.
Yeah. John was he went from Makers and he became a master of whiskey, or he went from being a master of whiskey to working at Makers. I think one or the other. And no, he's a legend. He owns a El Boco mezcal. Yep. Yeah. Now, and he's just, he's out there. He's always just, he's a sales guy. He's, knocking on doors and getting the brand out there. But he was a brilliant brand ambassador. Really, really knows his stuff. I shouldn't say knew. He knows. I haven't seen him in years, but so I should try to hunt him down. Come on the show. But yeah, no. So I mean, yeah. So you guys it's an unusual path. It's not an unusual path. So it's kind of how a lot of people in the beginning, a lot of brands found people working behind a bar. I mean, for myself, I did the weird path of I was working in corporate, and Tim, I know you kind of did this later on as well. I was working on the corporate side, being an account supervisor. I was helping managing programs and executing them across the country. And I was working on brands like Ciroc and Don Julio and, those kind of luxury brands. And then I just decided, I realized I had my daughter. It was 2005. And I used to be the go-to person. Like everybody would come to me and be like, Elaine, so what's going on? Because I was always out. And my husband, that husband at the time, husband number two, he owned bars and restaurants. He owned a bar. So, we were always in the scene. And then all of a sudden I had my daughter and I realized I don't know what's going on anymore because I'm a mom and I'm like living the mom life. And I can't answer the question, and people stop coming to me because they're like, "Yeah, Elaine does." I'm like, I can pretend I know what I'm talking about, but I'm just making shit up, right? At this point, because I haven't been out in a long time, and I made a career change. I was like, I met Steve Olson, and he came in and started presenting Tanqueray 10, and I was like, I wanted that guy's job, whatever that is. That's awesome, right? I just know how much money. I wanted to be Steve because I knew how much money I paid him, first of all. And it was a bucket load. Holy shit. And then I was like, he's so passionate about the brands and he's really into this. And I was like, that's what I want to do, which is a crazy move to make when you're working 9 to 5 hours and you have a kid at home and then suddenly you're going to take a job that doesn't have 9 to 5 hours. But, well, I just decided this is what I need to do because I wanted to get back in the street so I could be the person people came to and I would know what was going on. Like that was my thing. And I started really liking cocktails. And I was like, I want to be the mixologist and brand ambassador for Diageo. Yeah. And everybody's like, you're fucking insane.
I remember making Steve Olson a Chartreuse margarita actually back in probably about 2004, 2005.
Look at this. Full circle here.
That was my first time I met him. So wild.
Simon Ford, Steve Olson. This is like
Steve Olson. We all kind of wrap up. And I was very grateful.
Showing our age right now, aren't we?
Oh yeah, totally. Well, the Bar 5 had just come out, and that was 2005. And I was in the second or third class that they ever did. And that kind of helped me go in my career. But yeah, I probably ruined my marriage, but I did have a very successful career as a brand ambassador.
Sure.
And was able to bring my kid, probably knows more about alcohol because I took her everywhere with me, which I'm very grateful for. But all right, so I digress. All right, so what was the hardest part for you guys? Because you went from being behind the bar to working for a brand and then becoming a full-time brand ambassador, which is more of a corporate role. You know, what was the biggest adjustment for you? Adam, I'll start with you.
Sure. Interesting enough, I would say that my first couple of years with Maker's Mark, it was still, believe it or not, we were a very small brand. You know, we were 500,000 cases when I started. And so a lot of what we did was very autonomous and a lot of running and gunning and just doing what you could. And so we actually sort of prided ourselves on being a little bit on an island outside of the bigger corporate structure at what was Future Brands when I started, and then it would become Beam and Beam Inc. and then Beam Suntory. But back then, we were really kind of protected from being absorbed in a corporate culture to where we were able to be creative and kind of do what we wanted. And, you know,
who managed you? Who paid you, I guess?
Who made me?
No, who managed you? Who paid you?
Oh, gotcha. For a brief moment, there was a agency. So for about 6 months, I was an external agency hire, and Relay, I think it was. And then I was brought in to be an official Maker's Mark employee vis-a-vis Beam Inc. or Future Brands, and then we were fully brought in as Future Brand Beam employees a few years after that. But
Gotcha.
Those first couple of years were very, very non-corporate, I would say. And so as I had sort of established my roots in my own way of creative development and program development and trade engagement, things like that, you know, I had already kind of figured out my way to do things when all of a sudden then I had to enter the onion culture and then figure out how my technique meshed with, you know, some of the requirements of now becoming part of that multi-layered machine, right?
Yeah. Now there is that benefit of working for an agency. Like the agency kind of gives you a layer of protection in between you and the brand and the corporate structure, and it can be a little more casual, which is nice. I found sometimes the disadvantage though is like when you don't work directly for the company itself, you don't have as much interaction with the brand teams,
right,
which means you don't have as much say. Like you have say in your own autonomy, you can do what you want, but at the same time you don't get to change. Like if the brand's going in a certain direction, you have they don't really talk to you about it.
Yeah.
They're not having that conversation.
And because we were a relatively small team, I started with we had an ambassador in Kentucky, my home state, obviously. We had an ambassador out in San Francisco. And then we grew to about 5 more people, and then 10, and then 20, and then got smaller again. But you know, because we were a pretty insightful group of folks with a lot of experience of just being out there in the market, we did get a lot of back and forth with the people that were running the brand. So
that's great.
It was a really great time. It was a great time to get into the business. It was a great time to get into the position. It was a great time, you know, to sort of really just to get to know like a lot of the people that are now the foundation of the culture that we live in now, right? So it was good. I got no complaints.
Yeah. And Tim, for you?
About the adjustment? Because
the adjustment.
I was so into what Adam was saying. It was fantastic. I think making that adjustment or making that shift was 2 parts. It was kind of, there was the emotional side, which is really, you know, when you're in a career that you just love. And Adam, you even said this a little earlier about hospitality. Like that's absolutely still to this day my favorite thing about bars and restaurants is the hospitality, because I used to just love when guests would come in to sit at the bar. They would want to have a good time. If I could help enhance that time, that would like make my night. And if you could do that over and over and over again, you know, it just made me fly. So getting away from that from an emotional standpoint, that was tough. And then of course, you know, you have a dream of, my dream was to own a bar and a restaurant, right? And to say, okay, I'm going to make that shift. But the beauty of those things, and I'm a big believer of the forward progress. So it's time, you know, from an emotional standpoint, okay, hospitality and giving can be done in this brand ambassador world. You're so connected to
Now
the
you just have a
bartenders.
corporate card to do it.
It's fantastic. Exactly. Right. You can still do that, and life changes, and dreams change, and it's forward progress, and it's owning that. And that's what I kind of dug about it. From the business side, that's a whole nother topic. Like, what's Excel? Excel, computer skills, Excel, just the entire so from the corporate side, I never used Excel before. I don't know if you know Claire Burton Language. She worked because we were at Absolute Company together, and I would always be at her desk trying to figure out how do you use this formula. So between that and just having no idea, like if anybody's ever looking for like to make this change, I had no idea what anyone did. I didn't know what director of marketing did.
Mm-hmm.
Bartender, like what is a corporate? What is a SVP of what? So that was the changes.
I think that's a big one for a lot of people. It's like you come into an office and there's so many people. Trevor Snyder said it. He's like, it was so intimidating. I was walking into his office and there's all these people in offices and doing stuff, and I don't know who does what and what their role is. And then it's like, then there's like the director of marketing, there's a marketing person, there's a CEO, CMO, the CEO, like everybody's role. And I'm like, who's who? What do they do? What's their role? What's their impact on me? And if you're not used to that structure, it can be kind of daunting. And it's like, how do I communicate with them? Like, am I supposed to be talking to them at all?
It's visually jarring too, because you're in this business. You think you're in this business, right? And you are on the level of hospitality and bartending. And so you're used to your peers, and then all of a sudden you enter a whole new arena of people that are also in the spirits industry, maybe not so much the hospitality industry, but in the spirits industry, and they look absolutely nothing like you, and their education background is absolutely nothing like yours, and their experience background is absolutely nothing like the one you've had, and yet somehow you're supposed to figure out in that interview moment how to communicate with them and how to prove your value and how to kind of show like what you're capable of. And it's like, I had never really worn a suit, maybe a handful of times up at the point waiting for an interview, and it was crazy. It was crazy.
And I don't want to jump ahead of anything, but what Adam, what you just said about like how do those higher up muckety mucks, how do you show your value? And I think the best of the higher up execs knows the most valuable insights come from those brand ambassadors. For sure, the best managers of that.
Sure. And I highly recommend to brand ambassadors, like, get to know your senior executives. Like, if you're at a corporate event, say hello, introduce them, offer to, hey, would you like me to send you a report once a month? Because they don't know what's going on. They're in their white tower. They would love. The only time they get information is like somebody presents it all neatly packaged up to them. So for them to get like some in the street like intel, they love it. I found that I became like friends with Ivan Menezes, he's the CEO, like all the top people in Diageo. I would just introduce myself to them. I was the one, I did a little ass kissing. I made all the reservations for them, like for their wives, and like, they would call me like, Elaine, I need to take my wife out for anniversary. It's got to be someplace great. Can you get me into the place? I'm like, not a problem. Got you covered.
Yeah.
Making sure the drinks went over. But you know what? I always say this, like, they're my clients now. A lot of them who have, moved to other places, they remember that stuff. And I was the one that was personally invited. I was the only one allowed to go to Ivan Menezes, who's the CEO of Diageo's house, like to do like, me and like 2 other people to do, events or whatever. Like we were hand chosen, so it's those kind of things. And they remember that. So it's like, definitely. And they wanted to hear, I was like, hey, do you want to hear what's cool, what's going on? He's like, sure, send me a report. So every month I would just send them like, here's some cool restaurants you should know about, take your wife to. Here's some trends that are going on. He's like, thank you so much. This is great. And you would hear him bring it up in meetings sometimes. Like he'd be like, Elaine says.
I'll say, kind of to build on that, like one of the, you find your silver linings of 2020 wherever you can. But I would say one of the silver linings on last year with everybody kind of moving to Microsoft Teams, Zoom, stuff like that, is it did give you a lot more access to those upper level folks and national leadership, things like that. To where you could be assigned to be working on a task force underneath one of those people, or really kind of working cross-functionally with those leaders, and that's been a really nice opportunity. So that visibility for the ambassador and that visibility and understanding of the insights and what we really kind of see and live every day, being able to share that with them, that for me, that's been a bit of a silver lining.
Yeah,
It is. I mean, Tim, you work at a very small company. I wish I could be honest with you. I'm going to tell you personally. Like, I was so shocked. I went to Tim's company, and now I'm coming from Diageo, Anheuser-Busch, like, and I've been to other corporate. And I go in the first like presentation that I did at Tim's company, and everybody's just sitting around a giant table, like, you know, the president, whatever. Everybody's just shooting the shit, like. There's like the PowerPoint, which is like, you know, kind of done, but not really, but nobody cares. It's like, wow, this is great. It was so casual. Like everybody was having just a great time having conversations. And I'm like, I am so not used to this. And Tim would just call everybody by their first name. And I was like, wow, this is a very different environment. Yeah. So Tim, it must have been interesting as a brand ambassador working for a company like that. You must have had a lot more opportunities.
Yeah, well, once I left, when I left Pernod and Plymouth, going to Frederick Wildman, the wine importer.
Yes, thank you.
Kind of, yes, you get the opportunity because you can create your own path. You know, I was the only spirit guy at the time. It's a wine importing company, and I had one. You know, I was the only spirit guy, so I could just mold the job to how I wanted to mold it. You get the benefit for the big companies is you get a lot of structure, you get training, you get to work with cross-functional teams, you know, you get all of that. But you're in your own little silo. When you go to a smaller company or mid-sized company, which is ours, you know, 100, I think, wow, we have a couple hundred employees. I don't even, but you get your tentacles everywhere. So you can, and it's a great way to learn when you have that size of a company. So, and that's, I think, the best part of going to Wildman for the past 10 years is I just molded this position. I was allowed to, you know. So
yeah, I was gonna say that's
training at Wildman was here. You go.
No, I was gonna say that's. I think that was my next. One of my questions to you is like, you know, you moved from Plymouth, where you had moved from being a brand ambassador into a more internal role, like managing people, like and events and things of that nature. And then the job at Wildman came up with Chartreuse. So what inspired, like, what was the, why did you say, yes, like, I'm going to take that job?
You know, that's a great question. And I got an answer. First things first is when I went in to be the brand ambassador of Plymouth, it was part-time, then Absolute Vodka bought Plymouth, became the full-time ambassador. It was a few of us, Jamie Gordon, Chris Patino. And then there was an opportunity at Pernod to become like the consumer on-premise manager, managing, you know, sampling. Okay, let me try this. I don't even know what this is. I just remember there's sampling models, and I'm going to see this side of the business. And I didn't love it at all, but I learned it was, and you know, but it was shiny. It was like move to New York, get more money. You can work in a corporate America, you know. And I'm just thinking the movies. So that was. To work and do that, but what I realized is I was still, and I guess I mean 10 years, 15 years later, but I'm still a bartender at heart. So I loved that other side. And luckily Pernod let me go, which was fine. And I moved over to Chartreuse. They must have seen that I didn't have the love. So that's when moving over to this company with Chartreuse, working with bartenders again, really closely, being a brand ambassador was much closer to home. If that answers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have to find what you love, and when you're in a job and you hate it, it's like the days are just so long, and it's just, you know. And some people get afraid. You're afraid to leave. Like when I was at Diageo and I was getting to the end of my career with them, I was miserable. I was miserable for my own fault. I wasn't appreciating and. I know I'm jumping off course here. Adam and I were talking about this yesterday about, you know, I wasn't appreciating, for me, it was different. It's like, I wasn't appreciating where I was. I'm a person, I like to work hard. It's just who I am. I like to be like going full guns all the time. And when I slow down, I feel like I'm not useful, and which is not good because I should learn how to like just relax. And I wasn't appreciating where I was. I'd gotten to a position where I was at such a senior level as a brand ambassador and the mixologist that I didn't have KPIs anymore. I just had to come into the bar, and bars would come to me, and I would design their programs for them, and I would do TV stuff, and it was very glamorous. And I was like bitching about it. I was like, like nobody needs me. Like I'm just like this like puppet on a string, and I'm just doing these glamour jobs. And I should have just smacked Like, seriously, woman? Like, your job is so easy now. Like, you're like, you have no stress. Like, it's just an easy gig and you get paid well, and shut the fuck up. Like, just enjoy the moment. And my thoughts kept going, well, how am I going to continue this career into my future? I was thinking about the future, and I wasn't living in the moment and enjoying where I was at that moment. I was so worried about the 45-year-old me rather than, I think I was like 38 at the time or whatever it was, like 37, 38, like just worried like, well, I'm going to get old, and and I'm not going to look as pretty, and like, I'm not going to get the TV gigs anymore. I literally was projecting things so far in the future that I couldn't enjoy the moment and stressing myself out, where I should have just been like, dude, this is good. Like, just chill and hang out. And Adam, I know you mentioned this yesterday. Like, some people just stress out about their future.
My personal experience, I'll share this. It's been very hard during this COVID pandemic time just to not look at bigger pictures and not to borrow worry for things that you can't control, and just to try and be in that moment, and thinking like bigger pictures, like, how am I going to get this accomplished? How am I going to do this? And grieving over like program ideas that won't come to life, and the things that you had planned that aren't going to happen this year. And it was just, I think that is, that's just good life advice, trying to be in the moment. And I'm certainly not the most capable of that on any given day, much less when, your traditional way of working and the things that fill your buckets have now been taken away on so many levels. And you have to, rely on the things that maybe you took for granted when you were out doing your job in the way that we do it. But, that's also a balance too. And that takes some adjustment too. So, that being present, I know that everybody talks about it now, and mindfulness and all that stuff, so important as it is. But I think that it's really kind of bubbled up to the surface of importance in our 2020 highball.
I love it. Well, we're going to talk about your Jim Beam highball. No, I think it is. Yeah, no, Gaz Regan said it best. It's like being mindful of living in the moment. And it's so true. Like, I as an entrepreneur now, I do have my stress, where it's like, sometimes I'm like, crap, like, I don't know what work I have next month. Like, what's going to be paying the bills? And then I have to remind I'm like, I have money in the bank right now. I'm paying my bills. I live in a nice, part, and I'm happy and I'm healthy, and my husband loves, like, I think of all the things, and I have to like remind myself, because I start thinking 2 months, and I should be worried about that, but I also should just be happy that today I'm paying my bills. I'm fine.
Don't borrow worry, right? That's something I heard once that I really like.
Go ahead.
No, it's just on the heels of what Adam just said, and I don't want to steer too far off of your agenda, but it is interesting this past year, and being in positions that we don't like, or whatever it is we're in, there's always opportunity. And you just made me think about that, Adam. In this past 2020, and brand ambassadors in general are really not doing what they're done. And I know we have brand ambassadors, and it's been great, I think, for them. I don't want to speak for them, but I've been been working with them on, they've been helping doing other projects that a brand ambassador has no business maybe doing, working on digital and working on this and trackers, and it's really cool. So to watch them do it and do it well, so they're, it's just, this is like a year of building knowledge for everyone.
It is. An opportunity. It is a year of building knowledge. Yeah, no, I agree. It is a year of like expanding. You start putting yourself out there. Like, I'm doing this show because of 2020. Like, the project, like, yeah, it's like I created. It's like, all right, you need to keep yourself out there and put in the Andy. If you're still listening, I'm very, very proud of Andy. If you don't know Andy Furman, she's very talented, and she's been doing these very cool raps about spirits out there, and they're great. They're like 60 seconds, and they're so cleverly done. And I was very, I don't know, she was just being nice, but she said, Elaine, you inspired me, and you told me, I just in a Uber. We were having a conversation. I just need to put myself out there. I just need to start doing something. And I'm like, this was the year of putting yourself out there, learning, and so people didn't forget you existed. It's like, you gotta be out there doing something, and learning.
Andy's the best.
Andy is the best. And learning. I learned, I took a social media strategy program course. I took a full productivity from Darren Hardy course. It was a 3-month course on productivity. I'm taking an MBA. I'm getting my MBA at the moment. There's so many things. I was like, this is the year. I'm turning 50 this year. So this was literally last year was 49. I'm like, in my 50th year, things have got to be at a certain place. It's like I'm halfway through my life.
Yeah, but you're making it happen, and that's the important thing, right? You're making it.
Yeah, you sometimes you're gonna make it happen. All right, so I think one of the questions I want to ask, and we didn't, and I didn't ask you guys this when we had our preliminary interview, which was if you could give yourself some advice to your younger BA self, things you've learned now that might have saved you a few headaches. What would it be? If you could think of anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in there because it's pretty simple. I think I would talk to everybody. One of the things is you come in sometimes and you think, you know a lot and you want to look like you know a lot because you don't want to be found out that you know shit. And I still don't know shit in this role, So I think talking to people.
Speaking of Simon Ford.
Yeah. So basically just talking to everybody, and all the different positions. I think you even said it earlier, Elaine. It's make yourself close to the president of the company or make yourself close to Jamie Gordon. You know what I mean? Just learn what Jamie does. So
yeah.
Because you'll learn that and it'll help you go in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I definitely think there's a lot of merit to that, Tim, and you don't want to, limit yourself to who you think you can talk to internally or externally because of ranking or hierarchy or whatever, but also listen all the time, right? And then listen more, whether you're in meetings in a boardroom or whether you're sitting at a bar listening to a bartender or a buyer, anything like that, or a salesperson working with a distributor, whatnot. But then also too, talk, to agree with Tim again, but then also as a young ambassador, you have just learned a shitload of stuff that you are now just going to want to regurgitate as much as you possibly can because you're sort of rehearsing, right? Every time that you get the chance to talk and you're learning how to say what you need to say. But also I think that maybe dial that back just a touch because not everybody needs to know every single thing you need to know. Let people engage with you instead of just verbal diarrhea out into a world, right? Yeah.
Don't verbally throw up in people to try to impress them. That is definitely something I have learned. And the other thing is I've learned, and I say this, I've given a seminar called Building Your Personal Brand. And one of my key lines is fuck what people think. Fuck what the industry thinks. If I could go back and look at my younger self, I thought way too much about what other people thought of me. How much knowledge did I have? And it would make me insecure and I wouldn't put myself out there. And people would make fun of me for being on Bar Rescue, right? I would get there would be some people who thought it was amazing and great, a younger generation, and then there'd be the cool generation of the people who are my peers, our peers, who were I can't believe you're doing that show. That's so stupid, right? But meanwhile, if I would have taken that and promoted, so I would kind of hide it. I wouldn't really talk about it. But meanwhile, it's the reason why people pay me more now. Is because I was on that show and it was what actually helped me build my career because it allowed distributors not to have to explain me anymore. I wasn't I didn't come from a bar. They couldn't say, oh, this is Elaine from the world famous Katana Kitten. They would be like, this is Elaine. She's our self-taught mixologist. So then it came to, this is Elaine. She's on Bar Rescue. And people fucking lined up. But for the longest time, they really did. They would take notes. So it was oh, she's on TV. She must know what she's talking about, which is, as we know, really stupid. But that's how the world works. So I hid it for so long. I was embarrassed by it. And it changed how I reacted. So my older self now look back and be like, fuck what you think, what you care about, what people think. And just do you. Be out there in the world and be proud of the things that you're doing. And as long as you're not being an asshole and you're not hurting anybody and you're doing good things, who cares?
When you think about our collective start times in this business, I mean, I don't want to start a bigger topic, but you were also fighting another fight on the fact that you were one of a few women that were in this role of prominence that were on a pedestal that people were looking up to. So you had extra things to think about too. So,
Yeah,
when we think about,
it's funny. I never thought about it. People have always asked me that question, and I'm like, being a girl has always been really helpful to me. I'm like, I'm not bad to look at, and it's always worked. And and I grew up in the generation where men were sleazy, and I didn't care, and it was because I was just used to it. So it was like, not to you guys, just that you guys are gentlemen. But it's so for me, it was like, I'm going to use this to my advantage, But I understood where I had a role model to emulate as women came up, and thankfully the world has changed, and you don't have to deal with all that stuff. So I realized I had a role to play and leadership to kind of to be a role model for other girls coming up in the industry, which I'm very thankful to be. I know we got some great questions, actually. Donald, thank you, Donald, for tuning in. All right, so Donald asks, how has the recent rise in demand for customized store pick single barrels change the focus for brand ambassadors? Is anybody working on single barrels?
That's you. That's got to be you.
That's got to be you, Adam.
Sure. The months don't make single barrels.
Yeah. How's the rise in demand customized store picks and change the focus for brand ambassadors? I wouldn't say it's changed any focus. It's just sort of expanded our ability to kind of tell the story. One of the things about an aged product like a whiskey, specifically bourbon, is the fact that every single barrel is like a snowflake, right? Then there's none two that are alike. You can leave them up in a warehouse right next to each other, born on dates the same, bottled on dates the same, but they're going to taste completely different. And so it's really kind of, the world is thirsty for single barrel picks. We see that. We continue to see that through 2020. We have some great single barrels, whether it's Knob Creek coming from my distillery of James Redeem Distilling Company, or if it's our sister distillery down the road, Maker's Mark. My beginnings there with our private select. That's we're doing really well with those, and it's just given us an extra tool to use the story of maturation and use that tangible resource of being able to taste different whiskeys, either at different times from different warehouses, or maybe even from the same floor on the same warehouse that spent most of its life living close to each other, to be able to kind of tell the difference in how those flavors develop and what makes them so unique and what makes that single barrel such an adventure and such an investment in your own brand and what you should taste like. And I'm not talking my brand or the brand I represent. I'm talking about the accounts brand, right?
Yep.
So that
they can have their own house whiskey, right? Because they can go in, they can pick. I remember doing this with Laird's Applejack when I was helping them manage their brand ambassador program. We could offer different selects of their bonded whiskey, and their bonded Applejack, and it was a great program because it is an additional tool for the brand ambassadors to be able to use. Yeah. And you get the sampling. You have to make sure it goes quick because sometimes the person picks a sample and they wait 3 weeks to tell you, and then the barrel's already gone. They're like, that barrel, and you're like, sorry. Yep. We definitely had some problems, but once you sell a barrel, that's it's 10, 15 cases at a drop, or maybe even more.
Oh, yeah, but more than that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We're probably yielding, we try to get about 20, 24 cases out of a Knob Creek, depending on the age. And then over at Makers, we could drop between 40 and 50 cases, because that's just a refill barrel for a brief finishing process.
Yeah, no, I think it's such a great thing. And I think it's such a great thing to offer brand ambassadors to be able to sell, because it gives the customization. An account can have their own. And I've been to accounts where they have 3 or 4 different brands that have their own barrel selects that they work with, which is very, very cool.
And it's,
I think, and just to pick up on Donald or Donna, hi, Don.
Donald.
On Donald's question, if you want to go further, kind of the responsibility of the brand ambassador different than the salesperson. This is beyond barrels, but customization is huge. The sales distributor force, they work almost in cookie cutter. They get their programs, they get their dollars to spend, they go out and they try and fit it in all the different accounts. And this is where the brand ambassadors can really shine, is customizing to certain accounts, whether it's this program of single barrels or anything. Is the beauty of the brand ambassador, is knowing really what that customer really, really wants.
Yeah.
And
they can spend the time with them, where a sales rep sometimes don't have as much time because they have many accounts, they have multiple brands. For a brand ambassador who's very probably knowledgeable on the brand inside and out, really understands what the breadth of what they offer. They understand the accounts program probably really well. They can do all the education. They can really spend time with that account to customize
Spent
it for
hours
them.
deliberating with folks on barrels, just over 3 bottles, 3 different samples, and we've spent hours talking about what's the best fit and what makes sense for them.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you can do, to your point, Tim, better than a sales rep a lot of times can do, because they have too many brands to focus on.
Yeah. And it's you know, as an example, wow, we're going off, I don't want to take it too far off the topic, but when it comes to Chartreuse, which is kind of, you know, unique in itself, you can work with an account. You know, we put in a tap system. We was Chartreuse on tap. It's not right for the brand. It's not premium, but it was so cool because the account that we did it at in DC, Passenger, if you know the Passenger.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was great. They understood it, so they had fun with it. So and brand ambassadors know those nuances. Like, that bar will respect this brand, so let's do something fun and different. You know what I mean?
No, I think that's a great example. No, that's what brand ambassadors do well. All right, thank you, Donald. I hope that answered your question. Anna Marie said, don't write a 5-page email of all your great ideas to the president of Bean Suntory after a spark of passion and creativity fueled by a few pictures of pina coladas.
Maybe a couple bullet points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. That's very funny. I have learned, one key thing I have learned, and I'm sure you guys have done the same, is like, if I know I have a few drinks and then I decide like I'm going to do some work, I write a lot of drafts and I don't send them. Like my emails, I definitely have a rule, like, you know, just draft those emails and put them in, and then you can look at them again, you know, especially like a Friday afternoon, you know, you're starting to like get a little loose and, you know, you're just like answering stuff. And then I've made the mistake of sending a few and then seeing what I wrote. And I was like, yeah, that was not. So yeah, no.
Text I usually end up deleting, start off with, you know what we should buy? And then I'm like, no, let's go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, definitely not after a few. Okay, so I wanted to move into, you guys have both moved your roles into more senior positions. Tim, you're now working as a marketing director, and Adam as a senior brand ambassador for Jim Beam. I definitely know there's some skill sets that you probably had to acquire, and you're probably still acquiring as you move into those roles. So Tim and I think Adam, you actually said the same thing. We talked a lot about strategy, which is not something that is different for a brand ambassador versus working in a more senior position. So I guess, Tim, I'll start with you. Like, what are some of the things you've realized that you had to change, that was a big difference from leaping from one role to another?
Well, yeah, you had, you know, in a brand ambassador role is very tactical and execution oriented, and that's great because that's, you know, that's what you need to do. Stepping back and using your skill set that you have when you're a brand ambassador, like, you know, your persuasive communication skills, the way you speak to people, because you have to now take that and do that on a larger level with strategy, right? And
try to do that on a PowerPoint, which is not as easy.
No, I mean, communicating your POV, your point of view on a PowerPoint is important. Taking the brand knowledge that you did and the consumer insights that you have as a brand ambassador, and then having to put that all together as your ingredients to create strategy as opposed to just one tactic. That's the challenges, and that's an extremely challenging move to jump from just creating one event to what's the event for, you know, what's the end goal for that event, what's the strategy behind it. And that's been the challenge. And literally I say this as I'm also at the same time uploading videos of me talking to a Muppet. You know, that I did a puppet video with Nick Bennett and Joaquin Simo just the other day. So,
yeah, I saw some of that on Instagram. That was hilarious.
Yeah. So yeah,
I love Nick's puppets.
It's fantastic. So, on one hand, you got to talk strategy and big picture stuff, and that challenge, and then you still stay true to your brand ambassador self and talk to Muppet.
Yeah, and talk to him. And Adam, for you, like, as you've moved into more senior.
I think, you know, having an eye for talent when you make hires, you know, knowing who can handle the job coming from outside of a corporate structure. I think that learning management skills is certainly important. I think if you look at a strategic thing too, you want to you want to be able to digest yearly plans as far as what the brands are bringing down and how we can activate that in a way that resonates with the trade, and how maybe we can meld it or change it here and there, tweak it to make sure that it has more resonance and staying power and makes a bigger impression. But also take those annual plans, but understanding like the longer term vision for what that brand wants to be 5 years down the road, you know?
Yeah.
And wanting to be part of that brand for as long as you possibly can, you want to understand how to see it through to that place that it needs to be to get to the next place that it needs to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, not to speak ill, but sometimes you have changes in brand teams and things like that, and so they want to bring something new, but you understand the soul of the brand a lot more. So even with those different changes coming from the people that are going to provide you with the resources and tools, you still need to use your intuition and your instinct with that long-term vision of strategy into how to integrate what might be a little personality tweak to the brand. Okay, so
yeah, those are some of the frustrations. It definitely is when you understand the brand's ethos and it's in your soul, and then somebody else comes on the brand and they want to go in a completely different. They're like, yeah, no, this is not what we've been doing for the last 5 years. And I get you want to make your mark, but you're so off in your mind. You're like, you're so off base. This is not what this brand's about. And you have to do that education in a very tactical way. But at the same time, their role is probably more senior. Like, and one of the things I definitely experienced is like when I went to Anheuser-Busch, you know, I've been making drinks and working as the brand ambassador, mixologist for Diageo for 12 years at that point, or something of that nature. I'm bad with time. And suddenly I'm in this global manager role. And don't ask me why they wanted to hire me for that, but they did. And I was like, fuck it, I'll take the job. Sure, I'll make this work. And
we can curse on this thing. I didn't know that. What happened? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And
this isn't
Snapchat. Back half
Snapchat.
my material.
Yeah, and I got you know brought over there, and I was brought over for one role, and then they changed my position once I got there. I was supposed to be like helping like launch a new spirits division, and then they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that now. I'm like, great. So now what do I do? But the one thing I definitely learned, you know, as a brand ambassador, and Tim, you mentioned this, like we're tactical, right? We execute, and that's how my mind worked. It was like, oh, we have this goal, no problem. I got it. I got a plan. I got like 10 counts. I can get this in, and we can work it out. And my boss was like, stop. And I was like, what do you mean stop? He's like, I want you, sorry, my ear thing came out. He's like, you need to like create a plan for the year, like, you know, and steps for each thing you're going to do. And then I want you to do benchmarking, like who's done it before. I'm like, what's this benchmarking shit? And then I learned that it's really important, like to look at what other people have done before so you can learn from their mistakes. And then you have to do a test pilot before. And I'm so used to just going. And it was like, no, because you have to roll this out in 5 continents. And I'm like, oh, that's a very different strategy, right? So I'm like, you know, but it is about strategy. And it's something I will say now, and I would recommend this course to a lot of people out there. I started taking a course, which is teaching a lot about strategy and just thinking about how to make things scalable. And it's called the Power MBA. And it's a course that costs about $1,000. And it doesn't sound, it's actually relatively cheap compared to what an MBA costs, but you're learning from people who have MBAs and very successful. And it's a, you know, an online course. You take it when you can, and it's opening my eyes. I already learned a lot at Anheuser-Busch, and it was like a MBA in person, but this is helping round out my skills. So for anybody who's looking to make, like, just wants to enhance what they have, it's definitely good to keep taking online education courses so you can learn things like strategy and scalability or online, you know, social media strategy, because you just want to keep enhancing your skills so that way you can go to the next place. Mm-hmm. Those are my advice.
Word scalable used to haunt my thoughts several years ago. Just always like, how does this become scalable? How can I scale this? How can, you know, just always thinking about how does this big thing become this smaller thing? How does this smaller success become like, how does it resonate with similar success on a larger platform? It's just kind of,
it's a word you hear a lot in corporate, isn't it? Scalable. Yep. Like, how is it scalable? How can you do this in 50 markets?
Yep. Well, it's the best because I think some of the greatest programs come from the ambassador tactic, you know, and it becomes amplified, and that's, you know, some. I mean, yeah, I think almost, I would say we could look at almost every big company. Some of their great initiatives was because of one brand ambassador doing something really cool, and it was scalable and amplified.
I'll say it's
No.
amazing it's very satisfying when you see, whether it's yourself or your team, when larger programs come down on you, you can recognize like what things that you've done, the DNA starts to show up in those programs. That's even though it might be somewhat subconscious or not necessarily intentional, it is still a pretty high praise what you've been able to come up with and activate on your own.
Yeah, no, it makes you feel recognized. You're like, oh, that was a good idea, and now they're taking it and running with it, and hopefully not destroying it, because that's also frustrating when you see them take the idea in a very, very different. Well, let's talk about that, right? So, I mean, I'm skipping a question, but we'll go back. So, you guys have both created some pretty unique stuff. I mean, probably, I don't know if Simon's still listening. Simon probably created one of the most unique programs, which was getting a bunch of drunken bar on a bus and like going to all these historical places with Dave Wondrich and seeing Jerry Thomas, and it was a lot of fun. I definitely had some great stuff, and Adam, I think I mentioned to you, like, one of the programs that really, I'm really impressed. I sat down and you said it was Golden State Cocktail Week, which I was so impressed you remembered when it was that I saw this. And it was the triangle tasting. It opened my eyes about whiskey and understanding it. So tell me a little, can you talk about that? Because it's kept going, right, for a long time.
Yeah, I kind of hung my hat on it as far as like my marquee educational moment and opportunity for the longest time. It was just a way of representing what a bourbon's recipe was and how to actually how to represent that in the right way. My thought had come around, this is years back, when people were still kind of learning about bourbon and learning more about whiskey, and now the knowledge level is very high amongst just like the general population and the trade, of course, but back then there was still some misnomers or misunderstandings. And I remember a lot of times, especially as I transitioned from Maker's Mark to full portfolio and Beam, that people would always sort of say, like, if they knew what the mash bill of a whiskey was, and they basically knew what the recipe of the bourbon was, or the rye. And while that was like a little bit true, it certainly wasn't nearly all the way true. And so I started to kind of look at what the recipe of bourbon was on a larger scale, and started to think about what those ingredients would be that went into the recipe, going from the most like commonly shared ingredient at the top of a triangle down to the bottom of what would be the largest range of variants as far as the levers that you push during production. So going from water to yeast to mash bill to distillation proof to maturation to blending and then to bottling and filtration, like being able to explain where you can change things on any level of those, say like a bias going down the triangle, that would differentiate. Even though Knob Creek and Jim Beam might share similar DNA, we make a couple of tweaks along the way that change that code, and then it creates a totally different product. So people fully understand that a big distillery, and coming from one place that created one bourbon, Maker's Mark, with one recipe, and moving to a distillery that had several recipes that made a lot of different bourbons, you wanted to make sure that people were aware of the fact that what they were drinking was different. Because I had heard a lot of times, oh, Knob Creek's just older Jim Beam. They share the same mash bill. No, right? And so I figured out this way to actually make that a much more digestible and understandable concept, which I think once you kind of see it in person or however, you can take it from bourbon and you can actually start to apply it to whiskey all over the world if you want to. But I designed it for bourbon specifically, and it means a lot that you remember that program or that educational seminar enough to want to talk about.
My mind was blown, because I was like, they all have the same recipe, like they're all the same mash bill, but they're just by changing like the barrels in the different parts of the warehouse or the yeast strain with a completely different whiskey. And I'm like, that was just like very eye-opening. I was like, that makes so much sense why they can make so many whiskeys in one place. And you actually, it's now in a book, right? Somebody honors it. It's called the Adam Triangle.
I did actually present it at a half step in Austin, and one of the bartenders there, the bar managers who actually has been, who has come over to the Beam Suntory side, a guy named Rashid Barrett. He actually published the Harris Triangle in a book he wrote before coming over to this side of things. So I have published work out there in the world, which is an amazing.
Good for you. Good for you. And Tim, I know you had this thing. Chartreuse is such a unique brand, and I know to hear you talk about the monks, like one time you gave a presentation when I was in the office, and here you're like your connection to the monks, I almost cried. Like you're so protective of the monks, and I was like, wow, there's like such a deep love for the people who make this product and where it comes from, and you always try to honor that with the programs you do. So I know you I know you do a lot of things outdoors, and like let's talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting brand to work for. But people say, oh, it's really easy because people love it and love the brand, but there's challenges there too, because we have to protect, we work for the monks. That we have to protect their image. We are the stewards of the brand there, so we have to be very careful on how we convey the messages and the stories of Chartreuse. And unlike many brands, we can't talk about the technical side. They don't tell us what's in it, so we have to create experiences that are much more emotionally connected. And I think we could all agree some of the more impactful brand building tactics is distillery visits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going to the property and being there. And the cool thing about Chartreuse is it's outdoors, it's in the mountains. A lot of the monks take walks, the monks have herbs and flowers around them, so everything's outside. So if we can't take everyone to the distillery, let's bring the Chartreuse mountains to everyone. So that's kind of how I've been a big believer of doing things outside.
Mm-hmm.
Bartenders, a lot of events are always inside, so let's get the bartender outside. Get some fresh air. It's important. Let's get a nice, well-balanced thing. And maybe that outside idea came from, as you said, Simon's little bus tour. Little plug for you there, Mr. Ford. But when creating events or doing something around the brand, I always think there needs to be some sort of a call to action. So everything should have that kind of mentality in there. And so we would take people foraging. So instead of foraging in the Chartreuse Mountains, let's go in like Prospect Park, and look for burdock root, just like the monks do with a flask of booze. The burdock root might have a little, dog urine on it here in Prospect Park, Brooklyn, but it's still the whole connection.
Distill it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So it's just being different. And I think it becomes much more challenging today because there's so many great brand ambassadors out there, that how do you keep being different? And do you, or do you just be authentic with your events, like the Harris Triangle and foraging?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to be unique as you said, but true to the brand, right? You have to make sure the brand ethos is protected and stays out there. And I think a call to action is also really important. There has to be some sort of follow-up or something, that makes them love your brand even more, whatever it may be, that has them, what would be your call to action? Are you saying your call to action was for them to actually root or like, what's your description of a call to action?
Well, that's a good question. So when it comes to the call to action is, it's much more a cerebral thought. It makes you, it's more about how you think of the brand. So why am I picking up the burdock root and whatever in the ground? Well, it's the same reason the monks were doing it. So let me see what that tastes like in a bottle of Chartreuse.
Gotcha.
So once you start to drink that Chartreuse, you go, wow, oh my God, I just saw this live, with my hands. So I'm drinking a forest kind of a thing.
I'm drinking a forest. No, I think that's really, really important. And finding those activities, it's hard to stay unique. But I think you guys did definitely a good job. I mean, and we're not going to talk about, but your POS has always been fantastic. I have a lot of the Chartreuse, sweatshirts and socks and
good looking tattoos out there too.
Yeah.
That's not us. That's them. I love Chartreuse. I know.
There's definitely and Adam, I'd love to hear it. Like you also created a program, which is well, you didn't create it, but I know you talked about it. That you guys do at Jim Beam called Gym Class.
Yeah.
And you've actually been able to continue it through COVID, which is fantastic. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. First and foremost, I am not going to take credit for it because it was the brain baby of a wonderful woman, Megan Breyer, who was our Kentucky and then West Coast ambassador for a while, and she's kind of gone into internal structure there out of Chicago and Kentucky. But it was really a way to deep dive give a deep dive into like the whiskey making process and even outside the whiskey making process with history and then also regulatory and sensory science. So we created this activation that went coast to coast for 2 years, 2018, 2019. And we would pick unique environments. We were able to activate this at Cowboy Stadium in Dallas. We were able to activate this at like the Field Museum in Chicago. Some really cool spots where we would create a classroom environment and people would be able to go from place to place, gym class, JIM. So we had this whole idea of like recreating a collegiate or professorial look around the thing. And so folks would kind of be able to understand the ins and outs. And they would spend about 4 hours with us going through this school day that would start with a bell. And we would go through different periods where you would learn from professors and ourselves being professors. And we would talk about the whole story. And so that was stuff that it took on its own form. And we were able to kind of grow it and expand it and tweak it in person to where it really, in my opinion, it was really one of the best in class, like soup to nuts educational experiences you could have in bourbon, not going to a distillery. But then obviously COVID hit and we thought we were going to lose funding, but you don't really need a lot of funding to do this sort of thing. So we were able to kind of take gym class into 3.0 for 2020. And we actually probably did more gym classes almost virtually than we were able to live because it wasn't a cheap proposition to actually activate and create it. So it was nice to see. Again, it's a good testament to like flexibility, right? It's a testament to being able to flex and create something, take something and tweak it to where it applies to the virtual space, but then also the attendance that we were getting. Like we did one for the Black Bourbon Society and they had maybe 150 or so attendees chime in across the country. And this is in maybe say September. So just to continue to see like that enthusiasm, momentum for online education or online engagement at a time when I thought maybe we'd be kind of waning off of that or losing interest and getting tired or fatigued. It was really cool to see that. And even, you know, doing this, I'm sure we've got a lot more people out there than maybe we might have thought in the beginning, you know, or thinking like, aren't we all finished with this? And people are still thirsty for it and people are still tuning into these things. And I couldn't be more excited and grateful that they do to hear what we want to talk about.
No, I agree. I think that was the one benefit of, you know, we can say there's a benefit to COVID. It's like we've all kind of gotten used to and adjusted to doing things online and learning things, but there's a scalability. I mean, we would have to go to trade shows to have some of the conversations that we're all having that I have every week with different brand ambassadors and conversations and education and to do the gym class, you know, and now we can like, all right, it's free and it's online and I can actually engage with them.
When people were like, isn't it hard talking to a screen? I was like, and this is back in March, April. It's like, actually, no. And it just sort of like further confirmed that I could talk to a wall, you know?
Yeah. I think it's only,
I would talk to it.
As a woman, the only disadvantage, and all the women I know can probably sympathize with this. It's like, yeah, for a guy, you just like show up, you brush your hair. For women, we're like, oh, we have to do the whole face. Like instead of just being on the call, we have to do the hair and the face and the makeup and the whole 9 yards. And it's like, oh, here we are. It can't just be like on the call. You don't know I'm wearing, you know, still have bedhead, you know, and just roll
the best hair on this call, just so everybody knows.
I think the challenge. I think the challenge for brand ambassadors on Zoom or whatever platform is I know that most, you know, there's a sort of acting when you are a brand ambassador and you feed off the people you're talking to. You know, you look at someone and you can see when they're absorbing that information and you can hone in on it when they, oh yeah, let me talk more about the mash bill. Oh, you don't want to hear about this because you can see their faces wandering. So let me shift. You can't do that here. That's the challenge.
It is very challenging. So I'm very grateful for people when they make comments on this because it does let us know that somebody's actually paying attention and listening. So I'm very grateful. And I'm running a little behind because I have to do a Clubhouse, but I did want to ask this question because you guys both have some really great stories and Clubhouse, I know they'll be fine. There's a lot of people on it. But it was, so sorry, Andrew Friedman, it's going to be a few more minutes. But for you two, if you get it synced, you also didn't come on to the category as experts, right? So this is 2005. Nobody was really experts at that point. Mixology was it was just becoming a thing. So learning how to make great cocktails, becoming spirits experts, you know, besides Steve Olson, there wasn't a lot of, and Dave Wondridge being the historian, there wasn't a lot of people out there who were experts in the field. So Adam, I know you had a really great start. Like your first person, like you got to learn from was Dave Pickerel when you got the job.
Yeah, yeah. It was about 2 weeks after I had gotten my credit card and a cell phone and was told to go make friends. I went down to Kentucky in mid-April of 2006 and went down for a little thing we call the Maker's Mark Mile, which is a horse race at Keeneland in Lexington. And after that
Thank you, Chris.
weekend, I spent, what's that now?
No, sorry, just Chris. I think I'm pronouncing her name or his name. I can't tell from here. Right.
But
Thank you.
moving from going from the weekend's festivities, I was going to spend the next week working at the distillery with Dave. And so Sunday night we were closing down a bar, talking to each other, getting to know each other. I hadn't met him before. I hadn't been to a distillery. I just read what I had taught myself with and the things that I'd like to know about bourbon. So he asked me after about 2 o'clock in the morning, as we're putting down our last drink, he says, "What time would you like for me to pick you up tomorrow?" And I say, "Well, feeling, imagining that he must feel a little bit like I do. I'm like, whatever time you want to pick me up." He goes, "All right, I'll see you at 5." And lo and behold, 3 hours later, he picks me up in his pickup truck in Lexington, and we drive out to Loretto, less than an hour away. And we get there before really anybody's there. This is about 7 o'clock in the morning. And no one's really there yet. This is my first time seeing Maker's Mark, seeing the approach that I've now seen 100 times, and like going down the road to the little distillery and then getting out there. And it's a beautiful spring morning. We start walking through the distillery. He shows me all these things. And, you're starting to see like the pictures are real. The stories that you've heard are real. What Bill's told you when he came to the bar years ago is real. All these things are amazing. And we go through the process and everything. And then as people start to show up to work, we end up finding ourselves kind of secluded in a warehouse where we walk from the very top of the warehouse and learn about the Maker's Mark maturation story. And we might move through the middle and make our way down to the bottom. As we're kind of wrapping up the day, it's maybe about 9 o'clock in the morning at this point. And we're going to go get started on what the next shift is. But instead, before we get going there, he just so happens to stop next to this barrel that just so happens to have a bung hammer next to it, and then just so happens to have a whiskey thief next to it, just so happens to have 2 glasses next to that. And so he and I, in the spring of April 2006, I stood there in a warehouse at Maker's Mark in an early morning with Dave Pickerel as he popped the bung out of that barrel and poured us 2 glasses of cast strength Maker's Mark. And we sat there and we drank together. And it was a moment I won't forget, because it was a moment where I started to appreciate that a lot of my dreams are going to come true. And it was an amazing experience. And it was something that it's one of my most treasured whiskey drinking experiences. And it's something that I will never forget.
And then you actually worked at the distillery, right? They actually had.
Oh yeah. Then the next week I was free labor. Yeah, but hell, I was hooked. You could have made me. I would have moved a mountain at that point. So I learned to do everything at the distillery, working with guys and the staff everywhere there in the shift, and had a really great time. It was a great immersion to actually really kind of start to go from what you thought you knew to now what you really started to have a grasp on.
And I'm just going to ask you quickly. So that was in 2006, right?
Yep.
And when did you feel like you actually became an expert?
I still don't think I'm an expert.
Right. Well, everybody's always learning.
Yeah, we're always learning. I would say it took me about 7 years before I had a moment of realization that I knew what I was talking about. I was doing a training in Louisville, and I was asked a question, and it was somehow the way the question was asked, or it was a way that I decided to answer it. But I realized that how I was thinking about whiskey was different. And that thought process and those new channels that I had opened up in my brain pathways, it kind of allowed me to speak in a different way than I had just sort of spoken in the past, which may have been more like question answer experience. Now it was like question, knowledge, thought, answer, and then I had a moment of realization as I was saying the answer to the question. I thought to myself, fuck, I actually know what I'm talking about now.
And I think that's great, because I think so many people, there's a stress on yourself that you're like, oh my God, I should be an expert. I've been doing this for a bit, but it takes a long time. And as you said, we're always still learning. Like every single day, learning something new all the time. And Tim, for yourself, like Chartreuse, did you go straight to meet the monks?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, just learning spirits in general, similar to you. I think I don't know if we were in the same bar class, but the 2000 back at Keene's 2006, but that was the education for spirits, was just those greats of Wandrich, Dale, and Paul.
Yep.
But learning about that, going to distillery with the gin was key. Learning, being there and touching the botanicals when it was with Plymouth and Sean Harrison. that was fantastic of a learn. That's just sinking your teeth in it. Chartreuse was more challenging because you're not looking at what's in Chartreuse. You just won't know that. And to your point, I know you were like, you have to go be with the monks. It really is understanding better their entire purpose.
Right.
Why the monks make the liqueur, understanding the ethos of the brand it's not about the liqueur necessarily. The liqueur is to further support their purpose of living in solitude and praying, being closer to God. So they're praying for us. This past year, they've been doing a lot of praying for us. And
God bless the Chartreuse monks.
Yeah, so to understand that is just takes years and it takes visits to them. So and this is all from a Jew talking, who's a Jewish kid who sort of stewards a Catholic brand. So it's been a fascinating thing, and I think that's the challenge. But you have to really get to know them. You don't talk to the monks, but you talk to the people around them.
Yeah, I think one of the points I took from all of you guys, and I'm gonna slowly wrap this up, is that I think it's not just all about the knowledge that you learn. The temperature it comes off, the proof it comes off the still, or the exact amount of botanicals, or how much reflux. It's about your, how you feel about the brand and how you communicate to the people that you're talking to. So if they can feel your passion for what you're speaking about, whether all your information is 100% correct, sometimes you might fuck up, but you believe in your message and the story, and you believe in the brand itself, it's going to translate, and people are going to believe it if you believe it. Like when you told me the story of the monks, like one time you presented, I told you, I got teary-eyed. I was like, oh my God, I love these monks.
Yeah.
Like, I really felt, and when you explained how all the things were made, and the triangle theory and the different parts of the whiskey and like how much carry was, I was like, I'm in. I believe in this brand. Like I really understand this. So and I'm sure I am not alone. So, gentlemen, sadly, I do have to wrap this up to jump on the Clubhouse with oh my God, Friedman, and I almost forgot his first name for a second.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks Andrew.
For letting us steal her.
Guys, this has been fantastic. For all of you who have joined us, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you missed any of it, it will be online. It'll be up on Facebook for like 2 weeks, and then it stays on YouTube. Yes.
I want to address something that you spoke on earlier. I just want you to know that you were always the best part of every episode of Bar Rescue you were on.
Thank you, Adam. That's very kind of you to say. I wish John Chaffer was here for you to say that to him.
It wasn't him. You.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't think his ego could handle that. Yeah. But I appreciate it. Guys, this has been great. It's been so lovely to see both of you, and I look forward to doing it in person really, really soon. So
good to see you.
Thanks again for sharing.
Bye, everybody. Okay. See y'all.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Janine.